What's up, everybody? Beautiful people. Thank you for joining us. This is Dope People. And normally we talk about the cannabis industry and the business of cannabis, but today we're going to switch it up a little bit. We're talking about a different plant that's probably been on the wrong side of history in many ways. Today we're going to be talking with Ophelia Chong, the founder of the short Yellow Gnome. She's here with us today. And one of the dope things about her is she has had 5 or 6 successful careers already, while the rest of us are still chasing our first. And one of which is in the cannabis industry, so we'll get into that. But today we're going to be talking about mushrooms specifically and how in the last couple of years, she's really started to get into growing and cultivating mushrooms in her home. And so she'll be breaking it down for us. Yeah, excited for this episode. And you are joining us today on Dope People.
What up, Revel fam? As Jacoby said, we're switching things up a little bit. We're talking about another organism, a whole new kingdom, a phylum of organisms, not necessarily a plant, to correct Jacoby a little bit.
I saw that when I was talking. I saw Peter cringe, and I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah, I just had to say it. But, I mean, this phyla kingdom is super diverse. We're going to be talking about cordyceps, lion's manes, psilocybe, all sorts of different mushroom classes and organisms that have wide-ranging symbiotic relationships with plants, organisms, and us as humans. So I'm really excited about this one. Let's check in with our missing link. Lulu, where you at? How you feeling?
Hey, everyone. I'm feeling very good. I've been in the car driving from Los Angeles back to San Miguel de Allende for the past 6 days, so it's really nice to be home. I'm really excited about today's episode. I got to stay with Ophelia. We were in LA, and we've been trying to get Ophelia on Dope People or on the Revel Productions in one of our events for the past 3 years, so it's happening. I'm super excited to present Ophelia Chong, friend and mentor, entrepreneur, educator, activist, all things cannabis and fungi. So, Ophelia, super excited to have you.
Hi.
Hey.
Hello. I'm here. So, can you hear me? Is everything good?
Yeah.
Everything's good.
Yeah, we got you. We love the setup. Oh no, mushroom down.
Oh, it's okay. I'm also going to click off this free ad that this thing has, which is totally covering Lulu here. So, some sort of like, get 20% off a premium. Yeah, not right now. It's like bad timing. It's almost it's like having to pee and you can't. So, hello, and thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And normally I do have this amount of energy. Yes, because I go to bed at 7 and I get up at 5, okay? So, because I'm old. And Jacoby, I've had these many careers because I'm old, right? I could be your mom. I could adopt all 3 of you. So, yes, it's possible I could adopt all 3 of you. Yes, but thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to share the underground life of things that we take for granted that we both all started with was camel soup, cream and mushroom soup. That's probably the first time mainstream kids ever actually saw a mushroom. So here we are.
Well, yeah, it's exciting to have you here. Lulu and I have been talking about having you first at one of our in-person events. Then we've been digital for like a year, and we're like, we got to get her on here. And I don't know why it took us so long, but whatever it was, Lulu's trip to California tipped it over the edge, and now we finally got you right here. So we're excited for this. Thank you for joining.
Oh, you're welcome. And here I am. So thank you so much for having me. So where do you want to start?
Yeah, first of all, can you just tell us where you are?
Okay. Physically, I'm in Los Angeles, All right. Mentally, I'm everywhere. So I'm in Los Angeles. I moved here to go to college, and I stayed here. Got my citizenship in 2000 because I was a Canadian. I did the reverse. Most of you guys want to be Canadians. I became an American so that I could vote. Yeah, vote. I've voted in every dinky election all the way up to the presidential. So I'm always like the person go there and you go, oh, you're here. I said, yes, I am. I'm here to vote. So I'm in Los Angeles. This is where I landed, coming from Toronto, Canada. And I'm up in the hills. It's a very nice place to be, especially during COVID, which we will cover in a little bit. And
this part of your, like, what is the facility that you're in right now?
Well, because of COVID, we're going back to that. I was locked into my home, just like everyone else. And so I turned one of my bedrooms in my house into my little mini lab. So this is where I got up and went to every day during COVID. I loved it in here. And I basically taught myself how to grow mushrooms. I mean, really grow mushrooms, because I've been growing them since 2017, but just, haphazard, kind of trying, but not really into it. But COVID gave us all this universal get out of jail ticket to do whatever you want, because there's no FOMO, because none of us got to go to anything. So I dived deep into mushrooms, and this is the result of it.
Transitioning the bedroom. I love it.
Yes.
So we're going to go all the way in on mushrooms. But before we do, I want to understand from you how we got here. Okay. So I know that we could spend hours talking about all of your different kind of ventures throughout your life, but let's just kind of talk about the art world and then how you got to cannabis first. Then we'll get to mushrooms later.
Sure. Well, I began as a photographer for Raygun, which was a seminal design and music magazine in the mid-90s. It was my first job out of college. Then shot for them for 3 years. From there, I got lifted out of there into labels, Mercury, Virgin, quite a few, Sony, oh my gosh, there's so many, to shoot for them. But also I started designing for them as well. Then from there, I got headhunted into a film company, and I became the creative director and released between somewhere about 40 to 50 films, all very niche, because this is during the big Sundance days. And we had films there every year. So our niche was LGBTQ, foreign films, small, very independent directors. Some that were just starting out, like Todd Solondz. We got some Gus Van Sant in there. So from there, and also I was creative director for Slam Dance for 10 years, creative director for Outfest for 2, creative director for LAIFF for 1. And then I got lifted again to design a website for Jennifer Aniston. Not going to tell you the name because now it's a porn site. They gave up the URL. So no longer for 12-year-old girls in that way. So then from there, publishing, blah, 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 a lot of magazines, a lot of work. Stock photography. Also launched a stock agency back in the early 2000s. We sold it to another big stock agency. Then I came into cannabis. The reason I came into cannabis because my sister was sick. I looked at her. I thought, oh my gosh, she's a stoner. I started crying, went to a website. Of course, I knew all stock, and I typed in stoner. What did I get from a major billion-dollar stock agency? The keywords. Keywords are how you search for images on stock. So you want dog, beach, sun. So you're going to get images with those 3 keywords in there. When I landed on this major site with an African-American man with a joint, what were the keywords? This is 2015. Addict, criminal, illegal activities, drug addict, basically, really, 2015. So I was so mad that I created stockpot images that day to normalize and destigmatize cannabis users, from medical patients to moms, dads, kids, dogs. I had the biggest collection. I also had pregnant women, children, all model release too. One of my proudest images was of Paris Jefferson, this 75-year-old African-American man sitting outside his home, wearing a suit, a hat, and he was smoking a really beautifully hand-rolled joint just out in the sun. And if you can imagine that same man doing that 10 years ago, he would have been hauled off the jail. Paris Jefferson told me, Ophelia, I'm going to sign a model release so that you can license my image to show people that we're normal, right? And so that came out of Stockpot Images. That was my vision to do that. But to do that, I had to learn everything about cannabis because I'm sober. And so I did not touch cannabis. So I grew 23 plants. The seeds were given to me by a white witch in San Luis Obispo. She said, Ophelia, you don't know blank all about weed. Grow it and come back and talk to me. So I grew 23 plants. I learned everything about the plant. So then I could keyword everything properly. From there, I saw hemp was going to come in. So I created a hemp collection before the Farm Bill came in. And then also around 2017, I saw psilocybin mushrooms coming in as well. So I did a big search for photography to shoot it. And I learned everything I needed to do this about the plant, about the fungus and everything else. So there we go. That's, sorry, long-winded, but that's how I got here.
No, it's perfect. I've talked to you yesterday about what we're going to talk about, and I didn't even know the origin of Stockpot. And I think it aligns obviously so well with our ethos here of just trying to normalize and show that these are everyday people. We've criminalized and vilified all of this behavior. So I really like hearing that story. What I also really like about what I'm learning about you is you get obsessive about something and learn like every little piece about it. So you started completely sober, not knowing anything about weed, and then grew 23 plants just so that you knew all the different types of strains, the different types of anatomy inside the plant, and how well that served you. So I think that's cool, and it shows what happened again later in your life with the mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And thank you for that. It really, because I always believe that if you were going to market anything or be in front of anything, you have to know everything about it. And so for cannabis, I did that. For mushrooms, I'm still learning. I'm not an expert. I am basically the person with the hands in the dirt, and I know the basics of how to grow this. I cannot tell you all the Latin names or anything like that, but I am able to teach how to grow all this stuff.
Well, what I
Sweet.
think is amazing, Ophelia, really quickly, is that you went through and did keywords for all of these images, 50,000, I believe. And the fact that you're changing the keywords that you found in 2015 and helping to normalize and destigmatize with new keywords that are actually reflective of what's happening in culture today. So that is 50,000 keywords, everyone. We can barely do our own SEO for our website. So
that's 50.
Thank you so much.
Well, but that's times a minimum of 12 keywords each. Right, because I'm trying to, it's machine learning. Like you're trying to guess what the words are going to put in there. So instead of just what you think it is, you put in everything. So it's like a minimum of 12 keywords per image.
Wow.
So I can't even do the math. 50,000 times 12.
A lot of typing.
Yeah. So you ended up going into the kind of this mushroom realm, but just before we get into that, you've done a lot of other cool projects in the cannabis industry as well, right? So you started with stock photography, but then you've kind of worked with some other really cool companies, and I just want to learn a little bit about what you do with them and how that works.
Sure. Just to quickly go over that, I was also, on top of Stockpot, I took on other work as well, because everything that Stockpot brought in stayed in there. I never paid my salary to myself in any of the years, never. So I went out and got a job so that I can fund everything I needed for Stockpot. And also my photographers got 50% of whatever came in off the top, which is unheard of in the industry. Usually Getty is anywhere from 5% to 10. Anyhow, so I went and got work so I could support Stockpot. And one of the jobs I had was outreach for a cannabis company in LA. And so I created the first and only veterans internship program where it lasted 12 weeks. They each got their own grow room. We walked them through everything from seeds to clones to all the way down to curing to trimming. And they were paid as well. A fair wage above minimum, 3 days a week, and they got the top level training. Half of them are now in the cannabis industry. The other half decided it wasn't for them, but also a lot of them had injuries. I had one guy from the Air Force who basically had his back squished in so many different ways, so he couldn't lift. So we made allowances for him so he didn't have to do certain things because I knew he was injured. That, and then also I did the first drag Pride Parade. We had the first cannabis company at Pride Parade in Long Beach, and also at RuPaul's Drag Race Conference, which had 80,000 people come by a whole booth about weed. So those are jobs that I took on to support Stockpot. There's a few more, but I think that was the most interesting one. I'm most proud of as well.
These are badass. Okay, I have one more that you didn't mention, which I think is also really dope, is the Asian Americans for Cannabis Education.
Oh yeah.
So we gotta go there.
Okay. So when I entered the industry in 2015, I would look around and I would think, I gotta find another Asian we can bond and talk about Chinese food and stinky fish and weed, right? So I kept looking around. I thought, there's no one here. So what I did, I founded Asian Americans for Cannabis Education with two other women, Tiffany Wu and Monica Lowe. Both of them dropped out within about 4 months. And so they decided to ask me, do you want to keep this? And I said, yes. So in the last 6 years, I've been doing interviews with Asian Americans in cannabis. Also, a really lovely pastor in Seoul, Korea, who is legalizing cannabis there. Because the reason I did this is to bring to my own people that fact that to destigmatize cannabis, and that is not the propaganda they were fed as a child or through their governments. Because the only reason they hate weed over in Asia is because of Richard Nixon, and China wanted to be in the UN, so they had to adopt that cannabis or the Schedule I drugs that Nixon put up were bad. And so that really affected quite a few generations on their perception of cannabis. So ACE was built to help to build all of that.
Okay, first question, do you sleep?
Barely.
Yeah. Well, Lulu knows. She knows I kind of trot off about 8 o'clock. I shut the door and I start reading. I pass out and then I get up around 5:30.
You are always working on something and on the go. And I'm excited to get to it. All right, so we kind of got the journey. Like I said, we could talk forever about your numerous, very successful careers. I love hearing the stuff you do. Even more so, I love hearing why you do it. But for today, we want to really understand these mushrooms, all right? So over the COVID experience, while many of us were able to just kind of isolate at home, some people picked up hobbies. My girlfriend got into real estate. You got into mushrooms. So talk to me about this early journey of the beginning of COVID, starting to tinker, and how this kind of became a thing.
Oh, your girlfriend made far more money than I did. So, so what happened was the same thing that happened to everyone. March in LA anyways, we were shut down just after San Francisco in the last week of March. And we kind of all looked around and go, oh, damn, what are we going to do now? Because there are no meetings. I mean, we're still working, but trying to figure out remote. And for me, I can't sit still. So the first 2 nights of the official lockdown, I needle pointed the coronavirus, right? So I did that. Next night, I needle pointed something else. And then the third night, I can't do this. This is not what I want to do for however long I'm doing there. So I went over to my mushroom books and also to Reddit and said, I'm going to teach myself how to really, really grow all kinds of mushrooms. So that's what I did. I was on Reddit, which is actually really great. And YouTube and books. I was going through everything to try and figure out how to do it, and then buying all the supplies that I needed bit by bit. So Amazon, I had one poor Amazon guy come to my house and drop off 100 pounds of rye berries. And when he put them down, I actually gave him a lot of snacks and food and drinks because I felt so bad that he had to do that. So that was my beginning of the COVID mushroom period. And then I just dived right in fully.
Okay, so what were the first things that you started growing? Like what's the
okay? Well, that's a fun question. So I wanted to grow food, right? Because hey, if I'm going to grow something, let's try and eat it. That's a very Chinese thing. If you're going to grow it, you better be able to eat it. You don't grow stuff that you can't. That this has no purpose. Maybe a few decorative trees. Yeah, but we better be able to eat it. So what I did was I went and got, I ordered liquid cultures. I found this company called The Cultured Mushrooms, and I ordered live culture. I'll explain that to you in a minute. Basically, I'll do it now. It's liquid. It's liquid that has a little bit of a sugar base that the Mycelium loves, and it has tissue in there. And so that's it right here. This is a big jar of it. Because you can grow mushrooms two ways. One from spores, which is, I would say, let's say that's the seeds. Or you can do accelerated speed of growing mushrooms by using liquid culture. This, if I sort of relate this to cannabis, then spores are like cannabis seeds and liquid culture is like clones. It gives you a little bit of a head start because you don't have to sit for that 3 weeks of waiting for your spores to actually start eating your grains. So I bought, this one is woodier. And so I taught myself how to grow pepinos, pink oysters, yellow oysters, reishi, cordyceps, enoki. I got so much stuff in here. So I taught myself how to grow all these mushrooms, and I'm still growing them. Like this one is black oysters, this one here. So I can show you this later, but all I'm going to do right now, this is all colonized. This is Mycelium here. I'm just going to cut an X, spray a little water, and then these big, yummy, edible black oysters will come out of here. That's black oysters. This one is Pathfinder, which is a big, another kind of oyster-like mushroom here. So, can I show you something cool? Maybe. Okay.
Always.
So also because I'm bored, I learned that mushrooms love wood, right? Because that's their thing. When you go to the woods, you'll see reishi or chicken, turkey tail. They're all those little things that look like shells. The Ganodermas. They are on trees. They love wood. Shiitake loves wood. These mushrooms love wood. These love wood. And so wood is also fiber, which is also. So being bored, I started growing mushrooms on toilet paper. This is right there. That's a roll of toilet paper, and don't scream at me because tell you toilet paper was never in shortage, right? It was never. I had a shitload of, excuse my language, a load of toilet paper. So that's toilet paper. Those are black oysters growing on there. And this is a book that also is having Mycelium, growing on it. I'm going to put it towards the light here. It's Mycelium's growing on there. And let me show you something that's a little further ahead. Same thing as a book. And
Ophelia,
yes.
could you explain kind of the different stages? So we've got a mushroom spore, which is like the seed, and you just mentioned mycelium. So could you talk a little bit about kind of the life cycle?
Yeah. Well, when a mushroom drops their spores, there's going to be billions. Because if you ever see spores, they're sort of a powdery, looks like basically makeup powder. They can go anywhere from a really deep red to a pale white to the darkest to almost black. And so when a mushroom grows up, it drops all those spores so that there will be another generation coming in. But they drop enough spores because not every place is habitable for mushrooms. They have to have a certain temperature, a certain amount of compost, a certain amount of shade as well. So what we do here is we try to recreate that forest or forest setting that they like. Certain mushrooms anyways. They like cool, dark, wet. So to recreate that, what mushrooms love to eat, you know, besides cow poo and compost, is they love grains. And what I do with the grains is that certain mushrooms like certain kinds of grains. This is oats. Basically, you can get this at a horse feed store. These are oats. Who loves oats? Oysters love oats. It just totally go nuts over oats. And this is millet. And you've probably seen this. It looks like birdseed, basically. What likes millet? Whole bunch of other mushrooms. And lastly, this is rye berries, which I love. I have the most success with this with certain mushrooms. They love that. All right, how do we prepare all this so that mushrooms can eat it and get really deep in it? Is that we have to make sure everything is sterile, because it's what fungus, the biggest thing that can attack your fungus is mold. And the most popular mold is trike, which is that green fuzzy mold when you lift up an orange from your basket and you see it all down there, or you're in the fridge and you pull out a hunk of cheese and there's this green fuzzy mold. That mold will kill mushrooms. So to try to avoid that, what we do is we sterilize every step of the way. All right. So when COVID came in, it was really hard for people growing mushrooms, because what do we use a lot of? We use rubber gloves, right? That was hard to find. And what we really use a lot of is 70% alcohol. You tell me, during COVID, where were you going to find that, right? So these are the tools that we really need. It is keeping sterile area, a lot of alcohol, and gloves. So in the first section, what we prepare is that we will take these grains and I will put them in a unicorn bag. We call it a unicorn bag because it has one microfiber hole, so that when you put your grains in here, this will allow air in, but not bacteria, right? Smaller things. So what we do is we put our grains in here. I'll add about 37% water according to the weight. I will then put it in a pressure cooker for 90 minutes at 15 psi. All right, pressure cookers scare the living daylights out of me. But I love them. I finally conquered my fear of pressure cookers, and me and my Presto, we are best friends. So what we'll do then is put these in the pressure cooker, and we will then pressure cook this for 90 minutes. Let it cool. And then once it's cool, what I will do, I will then inoculate the grains with the living culture, right? And what I'll do it in my flow hood. And what is a flow hood? A flow hood is another step towards keeping everything sterile. This is used in medical shops or labs. And what it does, it forces down air that has multi-filters in here. So it's pushing clean air down and out. So anything bad floating around out here will not be able to go in here. So I can just show you that. That's sterile. And then, so the fan will go on. So that's the flow hood. So then I'll inoculate in there. Then I will let it sit for about, usually it takes about, depending on the temperature in your room, it could take up to 4 weeks for the mycelium to fully colonize. And the mycelium is what this living culture is. It starts eating the food of the oats, and then it becomes a solid cake of mycelium. This is antler reishi. So what I'll do is then I'll break up this bag and take out chunks of it, and I'll put it into my grow medium next, because that's the second step. Now you've got the phase one, which is mycelium. Your next step is then putting it into what I would call a soil that they love. This one is a mixed media. It is hardwood pellets with soy hulls. They love both of them. I mean, the soy is really great nutrition, and the wood pellets is basically a rave party for them in this jar. They just love, mushrooms just love this. So they'll go in here, and then it'll colonize that, and then we get
Ophelia, can you
this.
just take one step back here? So the stuff that's in the bag on your left, like what's the texture of them? How much is going to go into the soil?
Oh, okay. The texture looks like this. This is a fully colonized bag of oats. This is Pathfinder. So it turns into this giant white of mycelium. This is the foundation of mushrooms, basically. You could call it the roots. This is the root of the mushroom. And depending on the amount, really depends on the size of the container. Just like a goldfish, you put a small goldfish in a small bowl. For something like this, I would probably put this into 2 60-quart bins of the mushroom media, the wood and soy hulls, because it's a lot of math to this as well. So depending on this one, I would probably split in half and put in a 60-quart bin full of this and then grow the mushrooms. But
and then the math you're saying, like, you weigh it? Is that how you know?
Yeah, you weigh it at the beginning, but now I've done this enough, I can just eye things really quickly.
Sure.
Like say, for instance, I know whatever the amount of grains I put in this bag before I put it in the pressure cooker, it will be 30% of the weight is the water I add to it, because you need to soften it up and break down the hulls a little bit so that the living culture can actually get in there and start eating. You want to basically open all the doors for the culture by doing that. You're giving it a little easier time.
And Ophelia, you take the syringe essentially, right? And you take the needle and you inoculate that bag. So you basically put.
Yeah. So what I'll do, this is a simplified version of it. This will be in the flow hood. I'll take the cap off, and then I will shoot a certain amount. Again, math, depending on how much grain I have, will be dependent on how many cc's I put in here. So then I'll shoot this bag. I will seal this with my bag sealer and just let it sit until it colonizes into a giant bag of mycelium like that.
And you can tell when the mycelium is starting to take over, right?
Oh, yeah.
Everything is like the white, it's textured, it's white. Like if you're in the forest and you turn over a rock, or if you turn over wood especially, you'll see these threads of white.
You might, but you would really have to look, because again, if it's in the open, there's dirt around it. So the mycelium is not going to be pure white like this, right? Because there's no dirt in here. So this is a bag that's half colonized already, right there. So you can see the mycelium is eating the rye berries across. There we go. It's fully white on this side. It just has a little bit to go over here.
And then when it's fully white, you know it's ready to take those roots and put them in another substrate, soil, if we would call it that. Garrett also loves it called.
Yeah, the best way to explain it is to relate it to the plant world. The plant world is the opposite of fungi, because plants will they have photosynthesis, but also they expel oxygen and take in CO2, where mushrooms are like us. They take in oxygen and expel CO2. And what happens is that with this, so to try to relate it to plants and I'll explain it to people, I say seeds are like spores, and you're putting the seed spore into something to sprout it, right? So basically what we're doing is sprouting the mycelium in these bags. And that way I have a feeling that it's easier to understand what mushrooms do in the next stage. So then, for instance, the seed spore is now sprouting into mycelium. We're now going to put it into a bigger pot so that it can grow. And just like transferring a small sprout into a tomato sprout into a bigger thing, you want it to grow and then finally produce. So basically it's the same thing. Seed spore, sprout, into the medium that it needs to go into to grow and finally finish its lifespan. I hope that helps a little.
It totally does. And once it goes into another larger container that has specific soil or nutrients that specific mushroom loves, then it will start growing, and then it will start fruiting. And the fruiting is the actual mushrooms that we see and we eat.
Yes. Yeah. So when we get to that part, that happens very quickly. Unlike a tomato plant, you buy it in May, you're going to get tomatoes July, August, right? So with mushrooms, you're going to put it in a bin, and within 10 days, it will start, all the mycelium start colonizing the soil, and then you start seeing pins, and they will start pushing up. And that from the pins from here, it will probably be ready to be harvested in about 3 days. Sometimes if you go in and look at it the night before, the mushroom is about this big. When you go down the next day to harvest, it's probably about this big. And also there's certain rules about harvesting. You have to harvest before the veil breaks. The veil is very easy to explain. Most of the times you will never see a veil on a mushroom when you go to a store. All the time when you go to Whole Foods or whatever, you buy portobello, the veil is already broken because you're seeing the gills, right? You see the gills. When a mushroom is about to drop their spores, they have before they drop, they have a really beautiful veil. It looks like a wedding veil. It's white, just underneath the cap, that will break, and then the spores will come out. So once the spores come out, the mushroom is then on its way to dying because it's done its job. So what you really need to do, if you're really good at picking mushrooms, is pick it just before the veil breaks, right? You can just see a little bit of ripping, but that's when you want to break it. So you don't want spores dropping on everything, because it doesn't taste good either. It just tastes kind of nasty. And also, if you really want to be a great grower, you don't want that to happen. Similar, if I want to relate to cannabis, it is letting your weed go too long, right? Of just not timing it properly. And then you get a bud that's, maybe not as tasty, a little too sharp, because it's left out too long. So you get really good after a while of knowing when to do it. And also you can, you really become bonded with your mushrooms. I go down and I look at them, and I talk to them, and I really feel close to them, because there's something about mushrooms that I feel very close to. Not just because we have the same breathing, but there is something very gentle and soft and happy about mushrooms.
Yeah, it's a really interesting organism. It's kind of like, I remember in my science classes, it was kind of described as an organism that was between a plant and an animal. And I think maybe a couple of years ago, it got it's a brand new classification of its own thing. And I totally agree with you. It's the fact that fungi in Mycelium is kind of the largest organism in the world and creates all of these interconnected things to all other living organisms. Like, what makes us think that it doesn't have the same effect for us, whether we eat it, for food as what you described, gourmet mushrooms, with, oyster, enoki, things like that, to, in our worlds of Chinese medicine, we have a lot of medicinal mushrooms. And I think it's really beautiful to kind of see the evolution that's happening, where people are actually interested in the medicinal side. I think you called them adaptogenic mushrooms, with the lion's mane and the cordyceps and the reishi. And, even now with the psychedelic, with the psilocybin that's out there, that we're starting to learn how this species has so many benefits for us as human beings, as well as other animals, and how, it's kind of evolved parallel to all of these organisms, probably even before, humans even existed.
Yeah, and to that, it's also about controlling the whole thing about COVID was that everything was out of our control. we ran like crazy to find toilet paper when there really wasn't a shortage, or running to the grocery store and trying to buy as many things you can. I'm sure so many people have stuff in the garage, but it is trying to find some way to control your own medicine, which is what cannabis is about. The ability to grow your own plants so that you have your medicine. And growing psilocybin or any of these other mushrooms, adaptogenic and entheogens, is that you have control over your own supply. There is no middleman. There is no having to run out. It is having what you need at your fingertips. Because with that, I'll bring this back. I started exploring different ways of using mushrooms. And one of my most popular ones that I created was I took my mushrooms, the adaptogenic ones, lion's mane, cordyceps, and reishi that I grow, and I mixed it in organic honey that I got from a beekeeper. And so this honey now has lion's manes and also has ginseng, cordyceps, and lion's mane. All of them are huge benefits for the brain, for inflammation, for gut, and it's completely preserved in this honey. There is a version of this in psilocybin called blue honey. It is a great way to give to patients who can't swallow large capsules, who have a hard time chewing, to put this medicated honey under their tongues and just let them just have it go sublingual, or have it added to their tea or water. It is another way of preserving the medicine you're growing. So you can dehydrate like I do, like this, and this can be made in soups or eating or medicine, and also preserving it in honey for your friends who need it. That is, so again, is controlling your medicine, but also helping your community by offering to them some help that is not a pharma.
And when you're making these things on your own, how are you able to have confidence in the dosage?
That's all anecdotal, right? Because right now we're working in this world. There is a lot of research being done, right? A lot of research being done, but there's so many different varietals to mushrooms. There's just like there is different strains in cannabis, right? And each one is, we've gone through the whole indica sativa hybrid thing, right? I have my guess as to really if those categories are correct, but in mushrooms we haven't had enough studies on using just one varietal, right? It's usually a combination or one mushroom that they're using, right? So we really don't know about dosing. And I really think too, it depends on where you get it, because who knows what the additives are, or how they grew it, or the varietal they have. So really it's anecdotal. I can say I'm giving you X mushroom, and you're going to come back with your weight, your tolerance, what you ate that day, what you were drinking, what you were doing, and it would not really relate to the next person, right? So dosing, I think we're still trying to figure that out. There is a general dosing, but until we really find out the distinct dosing for distinct varietals, I don't think there's really a way to tell how to dose. I mean, there is a minimum, but we're just kind of making it up as we go, I think.
I'm going to be a little bit. Oh,
no, go for it.
I was going to ask. So, Ophelia, if say I wanted to grow the magic mushrooms, the psilocybin mushrooms, the process in which you described is something I could also use for that world as well.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. The only difference is phase 2, where adaptogenic mushrooms, like I said earlier, reishi, lion's mane, they all love wood. Psilocybin, not so much. They like cocoa fiber, core fiber, vermiculite, a little perlite, some pasteurized horse poo, and gypsum. So it's a little, the mixes is a little different than you would for, say, oyster mushrooms. Again, just like plants, right? Cactus likes a different kind of soil, whereas a tomato likes a different kind of soil. So it's not generalized into one thing for many, right? Because we don't do that normally anyhow. When you go into a store, there's what, 5 different sizes? Is because everyone's different and every mushroom is different, every plant is different, and they all need different things. So there's not one general block of something that you can just stick every mushroom into.
So people, there's lots of resources out there to figure out the type of mushroom that you want to grow and the different grow mediums that they prefer.
Can you just repeat that one? Sorry.
Oh,
She was just talking to the audience. I do have a question from our audience. David in the chat is asking if there's any infusion techniques that you can share.
Oh, sorry. Can you ask that question again? Because there's some really weird buzzing going on in my head earbud. What was the question again, Jacoby? Sorry.
Are there any infusion techniques that you could share with us?
Infusion techniques, like infusing food with mushrooms?
Yeah, like the mix that you just showed us, right?
Oh, the honey?
Yeah. Any things that you're infusing from your mushrooms?
Well, it's sort of weird. A lot of people want to draw a correlation with cannabis, the cannabis industry, and let's just go for it. Psilocybin. They're completely different. I see one as, yes, cannabis is medicinal and recreational. I do not see psilocybin as recreational. And so the delivery of that, I mean, you can put it in chocolate, you can put it on food, Dr. K and Virginia Hayes has a great cookbook on that. But really, to me, mushrooms are medicinal and should not be made into a gummy. If you want to do chocolate, that's fine, right? But putting it in chocolate has a whole different connotation to it. It becomes recreational, it becomes a dessert, it becomes a candy, it becomes luxury, right? Which psilocybin is not. It should not be that. It is a medicine. It is not a candy. So I created, and I learned on Reddit, for people who couldn't swallow, right? And adding the honey is a preservative, and it's sweet, so it kind of blocks some of the bitterness of mushroom. Did that answer your question about how I feel about the two different about infusing psilocybin?
Yeah, I appreciate the sentiment into like thinking about. I would even say greater than the cannabis industry. Like we're conditioned to think in terms of like consumer packaged goods. Right, like those are some of the companies, on Wall Street that are like really running most of the food that goes into most Americans' bodies. I think if I'm following the chat here, the root of the question was kind of like, if we can infuse a certain amount of psilocybin into something, then we can start to give like a normal dosing to somebody that is, like you said, using it as a medicine. So I think that's where the infusion question is coming from.
Yeah, you can try that. Again, you have to be scientific about it. You have to have a great scale. You have to be able to pack it into a capsule, and then take multiple notes on that. I mean, all of that is easy to do. Of course, you can put anything into a capsule. And could I just have 30 seconds? I'm just going to go off screen really quickly, but I can hear you, so I'll just be back in about 20 seconds, even less maybe. Okay.
And David, I think I just want to comment that, dosing right now for different types of mushrooms, I don't know if you're talking a bit more about psilocybin, there really isn't a lot of standards set yet for testing the different varietals in terms of, does an Avery, a golden teacher, A+, what is their potency? And I'm going into the psilocybin world, so I don't know if that's what you're referring to, versus, an albino penis envy, which is known to be, much more potent. So, but there is a group, if you're looking more for information around testing, there's a group out of Oakland called Oakland Hyphae Labs that is doing testing. They're the founders of the Psilocybin Cup. So they would be a great organization to learn a little bit more about dosing and different types of infusion. And also, if you are out in the recreational world, there are mushroom psilocybin vape pens that I've been seeing as well. In terms of how it's being extracted, I've heard multiple things. There's butane, propane, hexane. All the anes are also being used for extraction. So there's also a sonic extraction. There's also water extraction. So all the things that we're seeing with extraction in other plants, it's being used.
What are they extracting? Like in cannabis, they're specifically trying to get the cannabinoids, right? And they also might be getting terpenes, flavonoids, maybe something else I'm not thinking about. What are the things specifically that people are extracting out of mushrooms?
So psilocybin, which turns into psilocin when
it's the only thing. There's not other things like
right now.
Terpenes is a secondary thing in cannabis.
I think that's all being researched, and I'm sure if we got Paul Stamets on here, he would have a lot more to say about the things that he's doing. But he's also, proprietary for a lot of the things that he's researching. So, David, I hope Ophelia's back. David, I hope that is helpful. Welcome back, Ophelia.
Hi. Oh, I also go to research where you would not normally go. Go to Yale News. Go to any of the UCs that are studying it and see if they put up papers or if they have news on what they're doing. Look in places that you normally don't look for information like that.
Yeah, there's about, I think, 50 plus universities around the world that are doing research across different types of psychedelics, psilocybin also.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us? So, hey, Ophelia, can you hear us?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Something having a little weird computer issue. I can hear you. So what was the question? I beg your pardon.
So I was just commenting on your suggestion about researching for places that you wouldn't think about. And there's about 50 plus universities across the world that are doing research and publishing papers.
Right.
So,
because if you go to Yale News right now, there's actually an article there on depression and psilocybin and the use for ADD. So, and that was, I think, published about 4 days ago. So it's probably still on the homepage of Yale's News, so you can probably see that. So there's a lot of information out there. It's, again, just searching where you don't normally go. And that's one thing, place is called Facebook. So.
All right. So we will post some of those resources on our Instagram in the chat as they come up. So if you're with us, follow us on Instagram. If you're enjoying this, like the video, share it, subscribe to our YouTube while I'm talking about this. But a couple other things before we wrap up here, Ophelia. We've talked about like psilocybin and adaptogens. Can you just kind of give us like an overview of like the difference in these types of mushrooms and kind of explain some of that?
Sure. Okay, adaptogens. Those are the stuff you get at the grocery store. And also the things that I'm growing here. Cordyceps, lion's mane, reishi. Those are things you eat all the time. Ethogen are, on the other side, is psilocybin.
and those are what also known as magic mushrooms. A lot of.
Would you like to see a close-up of Mycelium and before we go?
Yes, absolutely.
So, just quickly before we go, because we're only got a few minutes. This is a close-up of. That's all Mycelium there, and then there's this little part here that is beginning to pin. Let me see if I can get a better light on that for you. There we go. Ah! I just landed. I just landed. Oh, that's okay. I'm here. Woo. Anyways, I'm in the show. Oh, somehow I just put the mushrooms on top of the thing. You can bring me back, I think. Ugh.
Oh no, I hope they're okay.
Oh no, I'm fine. The mushrooms are fine. I mean, they're not as delicate as you think. They basically, they're just, you can beat them up a little bit. They just don't like getting moldy. So
Ophelia,
that's the only thing.
We need your video back on.
I know. I think something happened. I'm sorry, but the end anyway. So let's see. How do I get my? Oh, there we go. It was that button. There we go. Sorry. Too many things going on. The mushrooms. I don't know how it did that, but I clicked the button to take the video up. Maybe it's telling me something. Oh.
All right. So final kind of question here. You've talked about there's like kind of like the legal food mushrooms that we're all used to. And then there's kind of this underground world of the psilocybin mushrooms, which I think if we were to talk in our own echo chamber of the three of us and Peter in the background, we're all 100% towards making that commonplace and accessible. But can you just explain a little bit of what you've seen in the climate as like psilocybin and magic mushrooms are starting to come to the forefront, and like why you think people are starting to now see the benefit?
Well, as Lulu will tell you, it's been filtering through in the last probably 4 years. We're only hearing a lot about it now because there are more studies, and also because of decrim, right? You have Oregon, Denver, right? Oakland, Santa Cruz, and soon, hopefully, because it's gone to the Senate, the bill in California. So that's why you're hearing more about it, because people are talking about it. They're pushing it for lobbying. I mean, these bills don't get written because some Joe wrote Senator Weiner, hey, I like mushrooms. No, it's because lobbyists have pushed him, and people and advocates, right? And he's also at the forefront of legalization for cannabis too, our state senator. So it's coming more because it's going through now the government, but also they're seeing the benefits of this because it does help patients with ADD, PTSD, any kind of trauma, also migraines and depression, right? And what I can see is that one large group is seeing a lot of money in it, and another group is seeing finally they're getting help. Right? The money is going to drive this car forward. Everyone else, we just have to ride along with it. And it is medicinal. It is not recreational. And that is my stance on legalization, that it is medicine, and that I do not want it turned into a gummy, chocolate bar, popsicle, a soda, a fake beer, infused into a pre-roll. I do not want to see it in any way like that. I want to see it as seriously as medicine for people who need it, and is not. We have to respect it that way, right? Because if we don't respect it that way, then the patients are not going to get what they need. So
yeah. For people that are interested in using this magical organism for their own healing, but they don't necessarily know someone that sells these, this would be their maybe first time trying to grow them, how would you recommend a complete novice try this out?
That's a very difficult question because people that need it eventually find it, because it is prevalent. Like you said, there's more people knowing about it. If you go on Reddit, there's a lot of people growing it and writing about it, creating grow kits for it. trying to move it forward. So you can, it's so hard. It's really sad because if you're desperate and you have no network to find this, then it's horrible. It's horrible, which is why we have to bring this forward to a pharmaceutical law so that everyone has access to it. Because who are you going to call? Your grandma's got depression. Is she going to call her local? Who is she going to call? Right? And I would not go online trying to find it because there are a lot of places you can find it online. I would find someone who can guide you. I would really find someone who knows what they're doing and help you, guide you to take that dose. Because I would never ever want anyone in the dark about doing this, because you don't want that bad experience. And also you want to be helped by this, and you need someone who can help you, guide you. It's very difficult right now, Jacoby, because if you're really in that much pain, who do you go to, really?
And I think there are some resources that are coming out. So I would do search terms for holistic psychiatrists. I would do search terms for plant medicine therapists. So I would start from there. To Ophelia's point, probably purchasing or doing things on the dark web is probably not the most ideal scenario. So I think those are two search terms that can start you in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah. We have to be able to get it out there to people without the fear of being arrested, right? Or losing everything we have, because we want to help people, right? So in as much as we want to help people, we also have to hide as well.
Yeah. All right. So we are out of time. I am so grateful that you joined us. It's about 4 years in the making, but we finally did it. Before we wrap up, I was just hoping that you would just kind of explain a little bit about the Short Yellow Gnome and what you have going on, and any way people can find you or see what you're working on.
Short Yellow Gnome was born out of COVID. It was hell. I got a lot of bags of mushrooms, so I just found a way just to sell them to friends through that website. Also, it's a great thing to have an LLC if you have expenses. So the Short Yellow Gnome was built for many reasons, and one of them was to help with the overflow of what I'm building. Because when I do things, I go overboard, like growing 23 cannabis plants the first year. I mean, right now I'm staring at probably about 60 bags that are ready to pop right now of oyster mushrooms. So they're all go to neighbors. My whole neighborhood is full of mushrooms. So that's Short Yellow Gnome. Other things I'm doing is just still putting around like it's COVID in my house and just playing and experimenting and failing a lot, learning from those failures and coming back and trying to do better.
And if you want to get in touch with Ophelia, askophelia.com. She's an amazing consultant, and as you can see, can bring vast knowledge and network to any project. So I'm super grateful to have you, Ophelia. This is awesome. I love your lab that you shared with us and all of the mushroom magic. And so thank you everyone for joining us this episode. Next episode, we will be talking to Leon and we'll be talking about fitness and cannabis. So see you next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And thank you again, Ophelia. Have a beautiful evening, everyone.
Thanks so much. Love to you all.
Thank you. Peace out, everybody.
Make it legal.